For 8 years, her husband said he was protecting her. "These parties aren't for you, babe. Too much business, too much stress." For 8 years, Nia Carter believed him. She thought he was shielding her from the cold world of crystal glasses and fake smiles. She believed it, and felt proud of that kind of love. Until tonight. On Elias's phone, the man who once swore he'd love her for life, appeared the message that made her body go numb. "This time, I don't have to invent an excuse to leave Nia at home." Her vision blurred, her heart clenched. The wide penthouse suddenly felt too small to breathe in. City lights flickered against her gold wedding band, glimmering like a cruel reminder of everything she'd given up. Every lonely dinner, every sweet lie. Every night she waited in the dark, thinking that was love. Now she understood. He wasn't protecting her. He was hiding her. If you've ever trusted someone more than yourself, only to have them tear that trust apart, stay. Because from this moment on, you'll watch a woman learn how to rise from the cracks of her own broken heart. The phone slipped from Nia's hands, landing softly on the carpet. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Tired eyes, beautiful, but dulled by years of waiting. She remembered 8 years of marriage, each one wrapped in his gentle excuses. "It's business, sweetheart. You wouldn't like it." Every time he said it, she smiled and believed. She thought he was protecting her from the ruthless world of men in suits and expensive lies. When they married, she left her career in finance, packed her office into 3 boxes, and moved to Houston. She called it love. He called it support. The first years felt warm. Flowers, dinners, promises whispered against her hair. But slowly, those moments turned into absence. He worked late, spoke less, smiled with one eye on his phone. Still, she told herself, this is marriage. This is loyalty. She didn't know that love built on pity always hides humiliation beneath it. Now, standing in their perfect apartment, the silence pressed against her skin. The truth was no longer whispering. It was screaming. For the first time, Nia began to wonder if she had ever been loved at all. Days blurred into nights. Nia stopped asking where Elias went. The answers were always the same: meetings, flights, clients. One evening, while scrolling through her feed, she saw the company's live stream. Bright lights, music, laughter. Elias, her husband, stood at the center, glass in hand. And beside him, Kendra, the young assistant with glossy hair and an easy smile. Nia froze. She wasn't angry, not yet, only hollow. He had said she wouldn't enjoy those events, but looking at the screen, she understood. It wasn't that she wouldn't enjoy them. He didn't want her seen in them. The camera panned, catching Elias's hand on Kendra's back. The guests laughed. Nia turned off the phone. The house was quiet again. Too quiet for a life that was supposed to be full. On the table sat the crystal trophy she helped him design years ago. Her fingerprints were on every document, every deal, every piece of his success, and yet her name was nowhere. The humiliation didn't come from betrayal alone. It came from knowing she had built the stage he used to hide her. The night stretched long, heavy with old memories. Nia walked through the apartment, her eyes tracing the life she had once been proud of. The piano he never played, the silk curtains she had chosen. Every corner whispered a lie. She remembered his voice in softer days. "You're my peace, Nia. You're the reason I work so hard." How many times had he said that before walking out the door? There had been gifts, diamonds, designer bags, weekend trips meant to say I see you, but they were apologies wrapped in luxury, never love. Her chest tightened. She saw herself through his eyes now, not as an equal, not even as a partner, but as a decoration that had outlived its charm. The truth burned sharper than the betrayal itself. He wasn't afraid to lose her. He was afraid the world would see her. Tears didn't fall. They dried before reaching her cheeks. Pain had already turned to something colder, quieter. The illusion was gone. What remained was the echo of her own silence, and the slow awakening of a mind too intelligent to stay broken. Dawn crept through the city skyline, painting the glass walls in gold. Nia hadn't slept. She stood by the window, coffee untouched, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for years. "If he wants to hide me," she whispered, "I'll become impossible to ignore." She crossed the room, sat at her desk, and opened her laptop. A folder glowed on the screen. Carter Holdings. Legal. She clicked it open. Contracts, reports, presentations, all bearing his name, all written by her. Line after line, memory after memory, poured back. The nights she stayed awake drafting policies while he slept beside her. The morning he took the credit with a charming smile. Her hands stopped shaking. The grief had turned into focus. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about how to save her marriage. She was thinking about how to reclaim her life. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned her. It fueled her. Behind her, the city kept moving. Cars, people, light. In front of her, the cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Nia Carter began to type, and with each word, the woman he tried to erase started to come back to life. The morning light sharpened every corner of the room. Nia's eyes stayed fixed on the screen as she opened folder after folder. Emails, photos, contracts. Every click cut deeper. In one message, Elias had sent Kendra confidential files she once created herself. Reports written in her tone, her phrasing. The same work he'd called minor help, now branded with his company logo and Kendra's initials. Her stomach tightened. She opened the earliest contract they ever landed, the one that built his empire. She remembered staying up all night drafting it, cross-checking every clause. Elias had come behind her, kissed her forehead, said softly, "You're brilliant, babe." The next morning, the signed copy returned, his name alone at the bottom. Now, scrolling through those same documents, Nia saw her handwriting buried beneath his signature. Years of her brilliance erased by ink and arrogance. Her hand trembled, but not from pain, from clarity. Betrayal wasn't just in his bed. It lived in every file he'd stolen, every deal she'd built for him. Nia closed the folder and exhaled. The proof was here, and this time she wouldn't cry over it. She would use it. Nia's phone vibrated. For a moment she hesitated, then saw the name, Carmen Lewis, her oldest friend. The one person who still called just to ask, "Are you okay?" Nia's voice was calm, too calm. "Carmen, I need information." Quietly. Carmen paused. "Tell me." There was typing on the other end, quick and confident. Within minutes, Carmen's tone changed. "Elias Carter is attending the Texas Trade Gala next week. Orion Tower, downtown. He's not going alone." Nia's fingers tapped against the counter. "Kendra Miles?" "Yes, registered under executive partner. Everyone's expecting him to introduce her." Silence filled the line. Carmen waited for a reaction, maybe a sob, but Nia only whispered one word. "Perfect." Her friend exhaled slowly. "Nia, what are you planning?" But the line had already gone quiet. Nia set the phone down beside her coffee cup. The steam had gone cold, but her purpose had never burned hotter. The betrayal had taken years to build. The reckoning would take one night. Nia opened her laptop again, this time not to remember, but to plan. "Texas, Trade Gala, Orion Tower," she typed. Dozens of links appeared, articles, press releases, photos of past events. CEOs, investors, government officials, every room filled with wealth and ego. It wasn't just a party. It was a parade of power. Her eyes lingered on the photos from last year. Elias in a tuxedo, shaking hands, laughing easily, standing in the center of attention he'd built on her silence. The more she read, the clearer her purpose became. If he wanted the world to see him as untouchable, then that world would watch him fall. Nia's pulse slowed, steady like calculation. She wrote down names, connections, sponsors. Each one would matter later. For years, she'd been the mind behind the empire, the invisible strategist. Now, that mind was free, cold, precise, and ready. She leaned back, whispering to herself, almost smiling. That's where he'll fall. She needed an insider, someone who could open doors no one dared knock on. 2 days later, Nia walked into a quiet cafe in downtown Houston. A woman sat waiting by the window, tablet open, posture sharp. Helen Vasquez, the most discreet event planner in the city. "Mrs. Carter," she greeted, voice smooth. "Or should I say, Ms. Laurent?" Nia smiled faintly. "Let's keep it Ms. Laurent from now on." Helen slid a folder across the table. "Your invitation to the gala. A complete identity. Nia Laurent, investor from New York. Background, portfolio, business website, all verified." Nia flipped through the pages. Every detail was perfect. "How much will this cost me?" Helen met her gaze. "A woman in your position isn't buying access. You're reclaiming it." The words landed deep. Nia reached into her bag, pulled out a check, and signed it. Her hand didn't tremble this time. "Then let's begin," she said. Outside, the city roared with life. Inside, 2 women exchanged a quiet agreement, one of professionalism and vengeance. That evening, Nia stopped by a gallery downtown. Abstract paintings lined the walls, but her focus wasn't art, it was opportunity. Across the room stood Richard Lawson, Elias's longtime competitor. Older, composed, expensive in every gesture. He noticed her almost immediately. "Nia Laurent." She introduced herself, voice calm, American accent softened. He raised a brow. "Investor from New York? I've heard the name." They spoke about markets, logistics, Latin expansion. Her insight surprised him. "You're remarkably informed," he said, studying her. She smiled. "I invest in what I understand." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that builds trust between equals. As she left, Richard's eyes followed her. He didn't know he'd just met the woman who would dismantle his rival without ever lifting a finger. Outside, Nia pulled her coat tighter. The night air was cool, sharp against her skin. Her plan was forming, one move at a time. The game had begun, and she would never be invisible again. Night returned quietly, but Nia didn't rest. She sat in front of her computer again, the glow lighting her face. Folder after folder filled the screen, all tagged with the same mark, NC Edit. Every document she opened carried her words, her logic, her language, her structure, years of work buried under someone else's name. There were notes in the margins, handwritten by her own pen. Check Clause 7, Add Liability Term. She remembered those nights, tea gone cold, laptop warm on her lap, while Elias slept soundly beside her. Now each file felt like a weapon sharpened by betrayal. Every saved draft, every tracked change was proof that she had been more than a wife. She had been the brain behind the empire. She scrolled through a folder labeled Carter Holdings Expansion 2018. Her initials glowed faintly at the bottom of every page. NC. She leaned back, exhaling. The anger was gone, replaced by precision. He had stolen her ideas, her effort, her name. But she still owned the truth. And truth, she thought, is the most dangerous file of all. The next morning, Nia walked into an old brick building in downtown Houston. The sign on the door read, Miguel Torres, Corporate Law. He looked up as she entered, surprise flashing in his eyes. "Nia Carter? I haven't seen you since university." She smiled faintly. "It's been a while." They sat across from each other. She explained everything. Elias, the documents, the stolen credit. Miguel listened in silence, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing as she spoke. When she finished, he leaned back. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then you're the real architect of Carter Holdings." Nia didn't flinch. "Then it's time to claim my empire." Miguel nodded. "You kept copies?" "Every single one." He smiled for the first time. "Then you have more power than you think." Nia rose to leave. For the first time in years, she felt taller. Not because of revenge, because of truth. Outside, the wind lifted her hair. The city no longer felt heavy. It felt ready. That evening, Nia sat in her car across from the restaurant where Elias and Kendra dined. The night was clear, the windows fogged by her steady breath. Inside, the couple laughed under the glow of candlelight. Elias reached across the table, taking Kendra's hand. "After the gala," he said softly, "I'll talk to Nia. I can't keep living this lie." Nia pressed record on her phone. The sound of his voice was steady, practiced, familiar. Kendra smiled shyly. "You really think she'll let go that easily?" Elias laughed. "She always does." Nia's eyes stayed dry. There was no pain left to give. She watched them toast to their future, unaware that every word was being saved. When the waiter poured more wine, Nia started her car. The recording continued, quiet proof of how small he thought she was. As she drove away, she whispered to herself, "You've underestimated the wrong woman." The night didn't feel cruel anymore. It felt like justice waiting for its moment. The next morning, the house smelled of coffee and silence. Elias came down the stairs adjusting his tie. "You look radiant today," he said, surprised by her calm. Nia turned from the window, lips curving into a gentle smile. "I have an important meeting." He laughed lightly. "Another charity project?" "Something like that." He kissed her cheek, already distracted by his phone. "Don't wait up for me tonight." "I won't," she said softly. As the door closed, her smile faded. She walked back to the kitchen table where 2 folders waited, one labeled Torres Legal Counsel, the other Helen Vasquez Events. She checked her reflection in the glass door. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who cried over a message. Her voice was steady as she called Helen. "We're ready to move forward." Outside, the wind carried the sound of construction from nearby streets. Loud, rhythmic, inevitable. So was she. The following days passed in motion. Nia cut her hair shorter, sharp, clean. It framed her face like armor. She met with a stylist, trying on dress after dress until she found the one. Emerald green silk. Strong, alive, commanding. She stood under the soft light of the fitting room mirror. The woman staring back didn't look broken anymore. Helen's voice echoed through the phone. "You'll walk in and no one will recognize you, not even him." Nia smiled. "That's the point." She left the boutique with a garment bag in one hand and calmness in the other. Later that night, she laid the dress across her bed next to the folder of evidence. Green against white paper, vengeance against memory. She traced the edge of the fabric with her fingers, whispering, "Tomorrow, he'll see me." It wasn't vanity. It was resurrection. In the quiet hum of the city, Nia Carter disappeared. And Nia Laurent, the woman he tried to erase, was born. Her reflection smiled back, unrecognizable. All she needed now was a new name to match the woman she had become. The next morning, Helen met Nia in her office overlooking the city. Sunlight cut through the glass, glinting off a small silver badge on the table. Helen slid it forward. "Your new credentials," she said. Nia picked it up. Nia Laurent, Manhattan Investments, a clean name, a perfect lie. Helen continued. "Business cards, investor portfolio, online presence, all set. By the time anyone asks, Nia Laurent will already exist." Nia turned toward the mirror behind the desk. Her reflection looked calm, controlled. The kind of woman who couldn't be ignored. She whispered to herself, "Nia Carter is gone." Helen studied her with quiet respect. "Are you sure you're ready?" "I've been ready for 8 years." They shook hands, sealing not a deal, but a transformation. As Nia walked out, the badge caught the light again. A new name gleamed where the old one had been erased. Outside, Houston buzzed with traffic and noise, unaware that one woman had just rewritten her identity. Nia spent the next 2 days outlining her plan with the precision of a strategist. On her desk lay a notebook divided by times. 7:30, Elias arrives with Kendra. 8:15, approach Richard Lawson. 9 unquoque, the reveal. Every step calculated, every word rehearsed. She cross-checked the guest list Helen had sent. Investors, journalists, competitors, all the people who once ignored her name would be there. On her phone, she opened the tracking app she'd installed quietly on Elias's device. His schedule synced instantly. Every meeting, every contact, every move. He had monitored her once through control and lies. Now she would monitor him through truth. At midnight, Nia reviewed her notes one last time. She drew a small circle around 9 p.m. and wrote 2 words beneath it. Game over. Then she closed the notebook, her pulse steady. The trap was ready. All she had to do was show up. The city glowed with evening lights. Inside Orion Tower, the annual Texas Trade Gala shimmered with gold and glass. Elias arrived in a black tuxedo, Kendra beside him in a soft pink dress. Cameras flashed, catching their practiced smiles. He whispered to her, "Tonight changes everything." Kendra laughed, nervous and proud. Behind them, reporters shouted questions about Carter Holdings and its upcoming deals. Elias answered with charm, masking the tremor of guilt behind his grin. Across town, Nia sat in the back seat of a black sedan. Her clutch rested on her lap, fingers pressed against it. Inside lay 2 things, her phone and the evidence that could end him. She stared out the window at the city she once called home, her reflection framed against the blur of lights. This was the same Houston where she had once been invisible. Not tonight. The car slowed as they approached Orion Tower. Nia inhaled, steady and calm. It was time. At exactly 7:45, the sedan stopped at the red carpet entrance. The driver opened the door. Nia stepped out slowly. Emerald silk brushed the floor, the color deep and luminous under the lights. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. A murmur spread through the crowd. Helen stood near the entrance, greeting guests, her smile professional but knowing. "Miss Laurent," she said clearly, "welcome to the gala." Nia inclined her head, calm, composed. As she walked through the grand hall, eyes followed. The quiet sound of her heels echoed against marble. Across the room, Elias laughed mid-sentence, then froze. The laughter around him faded as his gaze locked on the woman in green. His breath caught. Something in his chest twisted. The faint, unfamiliar weight of fear. She didn't look at him. Not yet. She kept walking, each step deliberate. For the first time in his life, Elias Carter didn't know how to smile. Helen guided Nia through the crowd of executives and investors. Cameras flashed again, this time for her. "Everyone," Helen announced smoothly, "allow me to introduce Miss Nia Laurent, investor from New York." Polite applause followed. Nia smiled, poised, eyes scanning the room. Richard Lawson approached, confident and curious. "Miss Laurent," he said, taking her hand, "a pleasure to finally meet the woman behind the rumors." Nia returned the smile. "Rumors travel fast in business. I prefer facts." He laughed, intrigued. "I hope we'll get to exchange a few of those tonight." "Of course," she replied. As they spoke, Nia could feel Elias's stare from across the hall, confused, sharp, searching. He didn't recognize her voice. Not yet. Helen leaned close, whispering, "He's watching." Nia lifted her glass, gaze steady. Then let him. The night had just begun, and the hunter still thought he was the one in control. Across the ballroom, Elias couldn't look away. The woman in emerald moved with quiet command. Every gesture familiar, yet foreign. Something inside him twisted. He stepped closer, slow, unsure, forcing a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said. "Have we met?" Nia turned to face him, her expression calm, voice steady. "You must be Mr. Carter. I've heard about your innovative methods." The tone was polite, but her eyes cut deeper than any insult. Elias blinked, confusion flickering. The voice, the gaze, it couldn't be. But when she tilted her head just slightly, the light caught her face, and the air left his lungs. "Nia?" he whispered, disbelief thick in his throat. She smiled faintly, unbothered. "I'm sorry, you must be mistaken. My name is Nia Laurent." Richard turned toward Elias, curious. "You two know each other?" Elias swallowed, forcing a nervous laugh. "She just looks very familiar." Nia held his stare for a moment longer, then turned to Richard. "How interesting," she said softly. "Your competitor seems easily distracted." The crowd shifted. The balance of power had already changed. Richard, sensing tension, smiled politely. Mr. Carter and I have met at many negotiations. Always interesting to see his style. Nia's tone was mild. Yes, I've heard his strategies often involve privileged information and very personal relationships. Richard chuckled under his breath. That's one way to put it. Elias stiffened. I'm not sure what you're implying. Nia swirled the wine in her glass, eyes calm. Nothing at all. I only admire men who know how to use all their resources. The words hung between them, sharp enough for anyone listening to feel the weight. Around them, whispers began. Cameras turned, sensing a story. Reporters, drawn by the tension, began moving closer. Richard leaned slightly toward Nia. You're quite direct for an investor. She smiled. Only when the return is worth it. Elias's pulse quickened. He could feel eyes on him. Colleagues, rivals, journalists. The perfect image he'd built for years was starting to fracture. And Nia hadn't even raised her voice. Before Elias could gather himself, a voice called across the room. Babe, they're asking for you. Kendra, glowing in her pink dress, waved from the crowd. She smiled, oblivious to the silence that followed. Every head turned. Cameras clicked. Elias froze. Nia turned toward the voice, expression unreadable. Then, softly, Your secretary? Laughter rippled through the nearby guests, quiet but merciless. Richard arched an eyebrow, enjoying the spectacle. Kendra approached, confused by the sudden change in energy. She rested her hand on Elias's arm. Is everything okay? Nia's gaze met hers, steady, elegant, cutting. That depends, she said. Are you handling business or pleasure tonight? Kendra blinked, unsure how to respond. The room had gone so quiet that even the orchestra hesitated. Elias's jaw clenched. Miss Laurent, this is highly inappropriate. Nia smiled. Oh, I agree. So is lying. The color drained from his face. The game he thought he controlled was slipping through his hands. Kendra, desperate to fix the tension, laughed softly. Actually, I'm not his secretary. I'm his partner. And his girlfriend. The words struck like glass breaking. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Cameras flashed brighter. Elias's breath caught. Kendra, don't. But she was already smiling, proud, thinking this was the moment he'd wanted. Nia tilted her head, the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. And does his wife know that? The silence was deafening. Reporters whispered into their recorders. Richard let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. Well, this evening just became interesting. Kendra frowned, looking between them. Wait, wife? Elias's mouth opened, no words coming. Nia set her glass down gently. It's all right. He's had trouble remembering that part lately. The tension broke into a flurry of camera flashes. Elias's world, his reputation, his pride, was unraveling under chandeliers and champagne. And Nia hadn't even raised her voice. Nia reached into her clutch, pulling out a slim folder. Contracts, analyses, all signed by me. She laid the documents on the nearby table, her movements precise, deliberate. Every expansion plan, every strategy under Carter Holdings bears my mark. The only difference, she said, is that you replaced my name with yours. The journalists surged forward, cameras flashing in bursts of light. Richard leaned closer, astonished. Is this true? Elias stammered. These documents are private. She has no right. Nia cut him off, voice like steel. I have every right. You stole my work, my voice, my years. The crowd murmured, tension thick as air. Kendra stepped back, eyes wide. Elias looked trapped, cornered in the spotlight he once loved. Nia picked up the last page, her signature visible in ink faded with time. For 8 years, I built your success, she said quietly. Tonight, I'm taking it back. She left the papers on the table and turned away, the flash of cameras chasing her steps. The empire he'd stolen had just changed hands. The ballroom had gone silent. Only the faint clicking of cameras broke the air. Elias sank into a chair, his face pale, the weight of his own collapse pressing on his shoulders. His empire, built on lies and borrowed brilliance, was crumbling in front of everyone who once praised him. Kendra stood beside him, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Elias, say something." He didn't. He couldn't. The only sound was his uneven breathing. Richard Lawson stepped forward, offering Nia a knowing look. He spoke low, only for her to hear. "Brilliant play, Miss Laurent." Nia turned to him, her voice steady, cold, final. "It's Mrs. Carter, for the last time." Her words landed like a gavel, closing the trial. Richard nodded, respect in his eyes. Elias looked up just as she turned away, emerald silk swaying behind her. He had thought he'd broken her. Instead, she had buried him, with grace. And as Nia walked out of that glittering room, the applause began, quiet at first, then louder. Not for him, for her. By morning, the story had spread across every major outlet. Elias Carter exposed in corporate scandal. The hidden wife behind the empire. Photos of the gala flooded social media. Elias, pale and silent. Nia, poised and unshaken. Journalists dissected the evidence she'd provided. Contracts, legal notes, emails. Proof that the empire of Carter Holdings had never truly belonged to him. Within a week, clients withdrew their deals. Partners vanished. By the end of the month, his name was synonymous with deceit. The same reporters who once praised him now questioned his every move. Elias Carter had fallen from grace, publicly, completely. Meanwhile, Nia stayed silent. No interviews, no statements. She didn't need to speak. The truth already had a louder voice. In her apartment, she packed the last of her things. She looked around once, calm, almost peaceful. The life he'd built on her work no longer held her hostage. It was time to build her own. 6 months later, a new sign gleamed over a high-rise office in downtown Houston. Laurent Strategic Consulting. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet efficiency. Nia walked through the glass doors in a tailored suit, confidence radiating with each step. Her assistant greeted her. "Forbes just confirmed the cover shoot, ma'am." Nia smiled. "Let's give them something worth printing." That month's issue featured her face across the cover, headline bold. "The woman who rebuilt herself." The article told her story not as revenge, but as rebirth. A story of intellect reclaimed, of dignity reborn. Investors called. Invitations poured in. The same world that once ignored her now sought her insight. In her office, sunlight reflected off the framed certificate of incorporation. The name beneath it read, Founder, Nia Laurent, formerly Carter. She traced the letters with her fingertips. For the first time, they belonged entirely to her. Months later, Nia stood before a small crowd of women at the opening of her new foundation. A banner behind her read, Nia Foundation, for women reclaiming their dreams. Her voice was steady, warm. This is for every woman who gave up her dreams for love and forgot how powerful she really was. Applause followed. Cameras flashed, but this time the light felt right. Across the room, women of all ages, lawyers, artists, mothers, smiled through tears. Some held new business contracts in their hands, others signed the first ones of their lives. Nia moved among them, shaking hands, laughing softly. There was no bitterness in her smile, only understanding. She had turned her pain into purpose. Her fall into foundation. As the event ended, she looked around the hall filled with women who had found new beginnings. That, she thought, was the truest kind of victory. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through her office window. Texas stretched wide beyond the glass, glowing in gold. Nia stood quietly, coffee in hand, watching the city she had once feared to face. Her voice came soft but sure. They tried to hide her, but a woman's light can't be hidden forever. If you've ever been underestimated, this story is yours. She turned, placing the cup down on her desk beside a small frame that held her old law degree. It was no longer a reminder of what she lost, but of what she reclaimed. Outside, her team laughed in the hallway. A new project, a new day. Nia smiled. "Let's get back to work," she whispered. Then, in a calm voice that carried purpose, "Subscribe, because every week we tell stories of women who rose again. The screen faded to light, and for a moment, every woman watching felt seen.